Hello and welcome back to the Land Rover Toolbox videos. Today we're going to open a can of worms. Recently we've been talking about bearing preload. Now I'm going to show you how to adjust the bearings on your Land Rover axle. Generally this is the axle that requires end float and not preload. Okay, so basically first we'll get our bearings in and then put our spacer washer, which is very important. You need that in there if it's fitted to the axle. Okay. Now the first nut is the adjuster nut. Now this is the one that will hold the end float on the bearing. Okay, so we need to adjust this up first. I've got a socket here which is 52mm. Also is a 1/2 inch drive, which means that I can use a wrench and a torque wrench on it. And Land Rover recommend first of all with the adjuster nut is to torque it up to 61 Newton meters first of all while turning the hub. This will seat the bearing in first of all to where it should be and settle it. Alright, I do this twice, click it twice then turn it. Then the next thing to do is turn it off by 90 degrees. So actually what you're doing is slacking the bearing off, as you can see there, 90 degrees. Alright, so you already have some end float and the bearing is quite free to move. Now this is a little plug for Paddock because they've got some adapters on a website which helped me out no end because I needed a 1/4 inch to 3/8 drive adapter to put this into the socket, and I'll show you why in a minute. But first of all I want to show you by hand, by feel, to get the end float is just to nip up the bearing and it feels nice without any play in it. Now the reason I've got an adapter is because I actually have a kilogram centimeter torque wrench. It's not click type. This actually is a dial gauge and it shows me what tension I'm putting on the nut. There is a little bit of a discrepancy, and this is the Discovery, which says tighten to 4 Newton meters, which will give you a hub end float of 0.01 of a millimeter. However, the 300 TDI recommends tightening it up to 10 Newton meters. This is on the Defender. And the other Defenders you can use a dial gauge to get the end float with. So I would recommend reading the manual and then going from there. I'm just giving you an overview. Using a dial gauge, which is actually recommended in the Land Rover workshop manuals, will give you the most accurate way of getting end float, and I will do this in part 2 to show you how to do it because we need to learn how to use a dial gauge for setting things on a Land Rover. Anyway, back to the grindstone. Okay, so I want about 4 Newton meters as recommended by the Land Rover Discovery axle, which is about 45 kilogram centimeters, and this gives me a slight preload, but it is actually an end float that we're looking for. Okay. Now, just to show you, it's a little bit tighter than hand tight. Did you see that? I moved that socket with a socket very easily. So as a judge by hand, you could get the socket and just nip it up. Alright, and that's good enough. That is the right adjustment, and there's no play on the hub. Okay, so once you're happy that you have the right end float, then the next thing to do is to fit your lock washer. The tabs are different depending on which axle they are. Now the lock nut itself, this locks it and keeps everything in place with the lock tab and the adjuster nut, because the adjuster nut won't move if the lock tab is actually bent down and the lock nut is tightened. So what we're going to do this up to is 61 Newton meters as is recommended by the Land Rover workshop manual. Some of you might just want to guess it. Basically it is not really that tight. So a pull and click, where you go, that's it. That's tight enough. That will hold that in place. Okay, so there's no drag on the bearings at all. And the next thing I'm going to do is to show you bending over the lock tab in this manner, and you'll need a chisel to get in there to bend it over. What I usually do is get it as far as I can and then whack it with a hammer to get it flat, so it's on one flat. Okay, that's locked the adjuster side, and on the lock nut side you want to bend it the other way. Okay, now you can get a chisel in there and bend it over as such. Now that will be locked, and we should be happy that it isn't going to go anywhere at all. So there you go. Just as a heads up, there's a full punch and chisel set that you can get from Paddocks quite reasonably priced. This is if you haven't got them in your toolkit. You're going to obviously need a chisel to be able to undo the lock nut before you strip anything out and take the hub off. Okay, anyway, that's it for this tutorial. In the following tutorials we'll be showing you how to remove and replace your wheel bearings, how to fit a seal, and do your brake discs. Okay, I know that we've done the adjustment first, however this seems to be quite a common job to do in your Land Rover, so stay tuned.